Hey everyone, welcome to our YouTube channel, Emotional Kung Fu. A couple of years ago, I recorded a series of webinars where I spoke about emotional intimacy. I covered topics such as um, exploring what are healthy and unhealthy behaviors around all of our primary emotions. Covered topics such as emotional weaponization, how emotions have been used against us in forms of defense against people who are weaponizing emotions and projecting fear, shame, and disgust towards us. It's taken me a couple of years to figure out what exactly to do with the webinar recordings that I did, and I finally decided to create a YouTube channel and put it all on. And along with that, we'll probably record a lot more content. Emotional intimacy is a real passion of mine, as is health in general: physical health, emotional health, mental health, spiritual health. And yeah, these podcasts are pretty. These webinars are pretty long, maybe about an hour and a half each. So apologize for the length, but there is a ton of information in it, absolute ton. There are about 10 of them, um, and so please enjoy.
Welcome to our session on emotional intimacy. So these next workshops or talks, if you like, will all be centered around feeling. It will all be centered around a particular type of feeling, which will be emotions. And I would invite you to use your discernment, open your mind, open your gut, and open your hearts to what I will share with you, but retain that discernment in you, that inner truth. So I want you to keep your bodies open to that. And I'm not a doctor, I'm not a therapist, but I do have a great deal of passion in sharing about emotions, about doing deep dives into our emotional world, into our feelings world. And for me, there's an art of feelings. It's an art of feelings based language, actually. It's emotional based language to which we can find literacy. So, and I call it emotional literacy. And I'm going to go through demystifying some of the jargons and some of the terms that we use in the realm as not the be all and end all definition, but simply my definition. I used to run these sessions in a corporate environment, in a finance space. And in the finance space, you think about it, people who chose to do accounting or finance or maths are very logics orientated. And so that space, that mind is very well developed. But what I found was very, very lacking was the feelings space and the emotional space, and especially literacy around it. So what I hope we can take away from some of these sessions, as they did, is more literacy around our feelings and in particular our emotions. There's a vast variety of feelings that we experience. Emotions is just but a segment of that, which I say is born from the gut. So that's something I hope that we'll take away from these sessions. Why is emotion, in particular emotional literacy, important? I remember sharing a really heart-centered, blissful embrace with this couple who we met in Egypt, and they were Romanian. But they spoke Romanian, and I spoke English. There was no way we could have taken that relationship any deeper. And we tried to find translators, etc., to help us, but it just fell flat. And that is how I would describe someone or relationships where we're unable to pull language out to talk to how we're feeling, pull language out, put words around emotions are arising. And instead of just simply saying, I feel confused, which is what a lot of people say, or instead of running away and disassociating because I don't know what I'm feeling, I'm going to go and I'm going to watch movies. I'm going to go keep myself busy at work. I'm going to distance myself however I know best to process what's coming up because I'm confused. When we can find literacy, words to describe our feelings, we start to come to a new place where we can unpack the layers of this ball, this big onion of what is our feelings and what's kind of built up around what I would call, say, conditioning, how we've been raised, patterns, behaviors, to come deeper to our core, to come deeper to our truth. What is truth? We generally don't know who we are or who we want to, who we just embody until we can start to unpack the layers of emotions, trapped emotions in our bodies, in our whole system, in our energy, to find our truth, our core truth. What are our true values? What's our core values? What do we value right now in the personas that we live? When we go to work, we find we have to be a chameleon or whatever that may be. In a new relationship, in the dating game, you meet someone on Tinder, you want to put your best foot forward. What does this all mean? How do we unpack that? And then what I want to also delve more into is this notion of the wording around positive and negative emotions, and hoping to slightly change that mindset of not looking at emotions as either positive or negative, but more as healthy and unhealthy, and the spectrum that resides within what healthy looks like and what unhealthy looks like. So it's less polarizing, it's less of a contrast. It's not good or bad, right? It's not positive or negative. It's not a yes or a no. It introduces a spectrum, a range that we can then sort of say, like, healthy. Okay, what's healthy look like for me? And most of us sort of think to physical health, and we say, okay, what's physical health? Well, a lot of us have a very wide definition of what physical health looks like. What's unhealthy? The same thing. There's a very wide range. And I feel very, very much the same with emotions. It's a very wide spectrum that we tend to use languaging in a very polarizing way. Good, bad. Yes, no. Right, wrong. And in the sensation of emotions, I like to use words such as pleasant or unpleasant. Why that? Because what one person may feel is a pleasurable, pleasant experience, like, let's say, running my fingers down my arm. For another person, that experience might be unpleasant. It might be itchy. And they might not like itchiness. So what that also brings in is less polarization to our words and more spectrum, and the ability to work in between all the spectrums, not just from one side to the other side. Does anyone want to say something about what else they would like to get out of these sessions before we go forward?
I think I think one thing I'd be interested to understand is, like, we always talk a lot and we do a lot of like self-work around like understanding kind of like our own emotions and kind of like figuring out ourselves. But I'd like to kind of understand also more about like the people that we come into contact with, and kind of like external influences on like our emotions and how to kind of better have, I guess, positive experiences with everyone. Because I feel like I'm quite open and I get along with a lot of people, and that works. That works for me and also works against me, especially in my like professional work life. So, and I feel like it's because I'm like one particular way where I'm like quite open, versus like maybe not everyone is like that. So I guess it's like, how do you work with others, people who are like really different from yourself, and yeah, like changing yourself, is that like a good way to kind of deal with that kind of relationship? I'm curious to kind of understand that and unpack that a little bit more.
Yep. Yep. Awesome. Thank you. I definitely feel there will be a great deal more understanding in that space. I sense that like a lot of emotional work, like people who are writing books and talking about emotions, don't necessarily go into the themes of what I call emotional weaponization and how people have used emotions and feelings against us. When we start to understand how we have weaponized emotions for the sake of controlling others or even controlling ourselves, we start to understand the strategies behind what someone may be inadvertently unaware of doing in a workplace, what that may stem from, whether it's from their mother's treatment of them, however, blah, 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 or their father, the way they were raised by their father. What tends to happen, what I found in my personal experience, is that when we can have that detailed level of literacy, that we know exactly what we're feeling, what the other person is feeling, and what's being projected onto us, and what is ours, what's our own. When we can hold that space in our gut, we can speak to it so much more eloquently, and our ability to navigate conflict and to navigate hurt and to navigate emotional weaponization becomes so much greater. I'll describe an example of this. I walked into the office one day and two people, we were going through a handover, like a transition in a way. And transition's always difficult for people because there's a lot of change going on. And in organizations, we tend to put the people side, the human side of us, our feelings to the background and go, okay, let's just become robots and do what we need to do. And so the feelings are largely ignored. We don't employ any coaches and specifically around emotions to help people address them because we don't have the budget for that. So what are we going to do? Generally, managers are left to fend for themselves, or the employees are left to fend for themselves, and that's it. So I walk into this room and I see two people almost breaking into a fist fight, literally a fist fight in the middle of the office, and nobody is intervening. And I brought these people into the room, and there was so much tension in the air. And all I said was, I sat them down and I said, I feel. And I said, I can feel this tension. I can feel the ice in this room. I can feel how hurt I am and you guys are right now. I can feel all, and I got really, really vulnerable, right? And I took it back to what our intentions were. Look, we're on the same team. These are our intentions. Our intention is to blah, 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 right? But because they felt a sense of, I'm allowed to feel, there is this softness that just drops in the room. But noticeably, when we talk about feelings, there is this, I'm allowed to be human. It's okay to be human. And so, yeah, a deep part of these next sessions will be deep diving into how do we get to that point? How do we get to that point that we can bring what I call empathy? We end up at this point of empathy. where it's not just a range of feelings that we're feeling, but it's feeling with heart. Okay, so it probably is a good segue into demystifying all of these different terms that surround emotions. But a term that's passed around a lot is emotional intelligence. And the way I liken it sometimes is like when people talk about intellectual, like the IQ test, intellectual quotient, and intelligence that's based around our mental capabilities. Emotional intelligence for me is a capability, let's say, be a psychotherapist or be a psychiatrist, where you have studied Jungian philosophy or psychological aspects of our human conditioning that then give us some kind of intelligence, an intelligence of the gut. I say that having a high EQ in that sense is not enough for me, because the word it really lacks is the word intimacy. For me, it's about emotional intimacy, because whilst our brain may be able to process a whole bunch of emotions of this is happening and this is happening to me, I understand it now, this is happening to you, it doesn't mean we are able to feel that space, to truly feel the emotion that's arising, to go deep. And that emotion might be really painful. It might be really unpleasant. And the thing is, what the word intimacy is for me is an ability to become really close to the heat, close to that which we want and close to that which is what we don't want. And often pain is something that we don't want. We want to wish it away. And unpleasant emotions is very similar. We want to wish them away. But for me, bringing out aliveness and passion is truly about getting intimate with our pain. It's actually about getting intimate with dis-ease, to find ease. But intimacy is not just about going deeper and deeper into pain. And for instance, like going deeper and deeper into sadness, for instance, can end up creating emotional loops that create what we call depression, these loops of feelings. Or like going deeper and deeper into anger and getting anger. And some people say the anger is ceaseless. It never stops. When is it ever going to stop? And we end up going into loops. For me, the biggest difference that we can make in this space is to bring the heart in. What does that mean? Like, what does bringing the heart in mean? It means finding acceptance and allowing the space for an emotion to arise, to fully engulf us, to no matter what intensity arises, that it arises, that we don't shame it, that we don't fear it, that we're not disgusted by it. It neither is triggering us into a place of happiness or sadness. There's more neutrality around it. And then this creates an embrace. It creates an energy that we call forgiveness. It allows for an emotion called remorse to come through, where we might be able to finally feel sorry for something that we did to someone else and we hurt them deeply. And this is where a lot of people say coming back to the heart is so important. So intimacy for me encompasses all of those parts, yet also it encompasses what I would term as healthy. Healthy, which is a very vast range of spectrum of what, if one person might consider healthy to another person considering healthy, is for me a place where we are either no longer hurting ourselves or other people, or we're becoming aware of how we are hurting ourselves and how we are hurting other people. And in a way, this is the path of what I call inner work. And what I'll do is actually I'll start to go into health. I'll start to go more into healthy, but before I go into healthy, I'll talk about what healthy looks like to me through my labels of primary emotions and perhaps secondary emotions. Let's unpack the 7 primary emotions. Happy, I think a lot of people know what happy is. It's this joyous sensation. What healthy looks like, I think most people already know. But what unhealthy looks like from a shadowy sense is, I use the word shadowy, but it's just from an unhealthy sense, is where we try to run towards happiness all the time. It is where we seek to be happy constantly, incessantly. And what happens is we find ourselves creating these conditions around our lives. And also, so often as parents, we want our children to be, say, happy. I want my child to be happy all the time. And this in itself can create conditions for how we're supposed to be. Here's someone telling us how we're supposed to be. How about I'm just allowed to be whatever I'm allowed to be? And how about I'm just allowed to feel however I'm allowed to feel? Whether that be happy or sad or ashamed or fearful or whatever else it might be that I'm feeling right now. That's the shadowy element of happiness. And on the other spectrum of happiness is sadness. And I think we all know what sadness is. And I will touch on more sadness a little bit later as I talk about anger, etc. In a healthy way, it's that we're actually allowing ourselves to feel sad, to cry, to shed a tear, that we can be taken into that space. And for me, this was actually something that was very difficult. Initially, I was brought up in a way that crying was bad. It was, you're not strong, Chris. I never saw my dad crying. And how many of us could raise their hands and say, I never witnessed my dad crying. I witnessed my mom crying even less. And as a child, when we see that, we think that's how we're supposed to be. Because generally, all we know is to embody our parents. And I'll go into discipline maybe a little bit later, but that's kind of what healthy looks like. Just this feeling of allowing ourselves to be sad. Unhealthy is where we might go into a loop around sadness. What do I mean by going into a loop? An emotional loop. I'm feeling sad for feeling sad. I'm feeling scared of feeling sad. When I'm feeling sad for feeling sad, for me, that's what creates a loop of depression. It takes us deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. And we feel like we can't get out of it. And it's true until we can bring our heart to it. Until we can bring empathy to it and acceptance. And this is exactly the same for every single emotion, is we end up having to find a place of empathy. But I will get to that later on. The next big one I want to talk to is anger. And the question I would pose is, when you think about the word anger, how many of you believe that anger is, say, bad? And how many of you believe that, or used to believe that anger is bad? And how many of you have now rethought anger, tapped into that, and found empowerment through that? For me, what's happened with anger and the core of anger, what it feels like in our body, and you think back to when you're a child or you see children running around. For me, the other word I give it is fire. I also call it passion. I call it spark. Why do I call it that? Because it's kind of what drives us to wake up in the morning and do something. And it's what drives us and motivates us to stand up for ourselves and say, stop. You're hurting me. And unfortunately, what's happened with anger is it's also been used in very hurtful ways. So go to your bedroom now, lock the door behind you, blah, 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 blah. Or abuse, physical, emotional abuse. Or control. Anger has been used in so many unhealthy ways that we had found an aversion to feeling it, or a need to want to put people in therapy when they're feeling it. And as a society, we have kind of either collectively gone numb to it, or it's very exaggerated in certain people. And I will talk about how emotions are pressure cookered later on in later segments. But healthy anger, what healthy anger looks like is anger can be very empathetic. It is when we express anger with heart, with love. And I'll just give a very easy example of this. And I'm speaking to you from this place where I'm connected to my anger at all times. I'm just going to speak to you, and like, this is how I'm going to talk. And yep, I'm just, going to say a couple of words like this. No one's going to be listening to me and paying attention to me if I spoke like that. Why? Because I just disconnected myself from my gut. I disconnected myself from my anger and my spark. I took myself away from that. And what happens is people don't pay attention to who we are, to what we want to say, because you're not even paying attention to what you want to say or do. Would you listen to yourself? And I'll go a bit more into how this has really been shunned out of us through the next emotions I want to talk to. Our spark and our fieriness has been taken away from us through three emotions, which I call the unholy trinity. And this is beginning to touch on what I would call emotional weaponization. But the first emotion that really traps us and makes us that inner vibrancy, this spark, this fire that's coming out, or anger that's coming out. The first door to this is fear. And if fear was like an image, what I would describe it as opposing fire would be, fire is this raging force, and fear comes up like a gate or a wall, and it just rises and goes. And what fear does is, like, think about this. I'm a child, and I want this, I want to have this bicycle, I want to run out into the road and grab this ball. Our parents are like, no, you're going to get run over. Stop now. This projects a kind of fear that makes the child stop in the tracks. And in that moment, if we choose to hold on to that as, oh my goodness, it's fear that's going to stop me from walking out onto the road, we remember that for the rest of our lives. Whether it's in our subconscious or it's in our waking moment, we remember that. That's in our body. I will also talk about what's healthy and what healthy fear is and what unhealthy fear looks like. Healthy fear is, for instance, where someone's running towards you with a knife. And you're sort of, yeah, there's some shock there, but you're scared. That's healthy fear. Why is it healthy fear? Because we can do something with that fear. It's designed to exit us from danger, right? But what's happened is that sense of danger, or our sense of safety, has been really distorted over our lifetimes. So we think a lot of things are dangerous to us now. We think that losing our jobs is dangerous to us. We think that failing exams is dangerous to us. We feel that meeting new people is dangerous to us. We feel all of these things are dangerous to us. And our sense of safety is almost abandoned, or it becomes very narrow in scope. And what we tend to find is we come into the space of what I would call unhealthy fear, which is like worry. We are worried that we're fearful that we're going to lose our jobs. We're fearful that our relationship is going to fall apart, and we can't stop thinking about it because the fear keeps us up at night. It creates anxiety. Anxiety is just fear in loop. And I will go more deeply into what in loop means, because I think it's an important topic to touch on in the healthy and unhealthy space. Is like, let's say I have to do a really important presentation in the future, or I have a really important exam that's coming up, or I really want to present myself well in this moment in the future, blah, blah, blah. What tends to happen is whatever fears which may have arisen along the way on our journey to studying for an exam or preparing for a presentation, it's outcome driven, and that's an important one. We're seeking a certain outcome in the future, and it's a way of controlling this. All that emotion of fear is compressed into the now. So you can imagine all those moments that we would have been fearful of, we are afraid of in this one moment of now, because we're thinking of the future. And a lot of people say, oh, we're not in the present moment anymore. Yeah, they're just some words. But really what's happening is we're remembering, we're thinking forward to the future. And humans, I think, are the only people who have this ability to go backwards and forwards in time, in a way that they're thinking to the future, or they're thinking to the past. Animals don't really do this. Plants don't really do this. And if we look backwards in time also, I did something and I feel really sad about it. Well, this and this happened to me. I lost my job. I became an alcoholic, and I'm in a really unhealthy shape. We can hold on to that point in the past and how sad we felt. And all of those moments to which we felt sad along the way are compressed into the now, and it creates a loop of depression. We're literally depressing ourselves through holding on to something that's happened in the past. That's what I would describe as a loop. Before I keep going, are there any questions?
My question was just around your point on the fear that, like I do get very, very, very afraid when my children are near roads. And, like I do feel a lot of my own fear projecting through me when they're near roads. Their awareness levels just kind of not, in my experience of observing them, I don't see the awareness levels being where they need to be when they're next to a road. But I also notice that sometimes my reaction, and I'll call it a reaction, not a response, but my reaction to them would be probably a little bit over the top, like, Leo, stop, stop next to the road, quite big, because that's often the only way to cut through to the guy, and I just don't trust that he's not going to step onto the road. So I see a lot of my stuff involved in there, but I also see the real threat of him next to the road and knowing him that he would just run onto the road and pick up the ball. So, you know, it is a kind of life and death situation, but at the same time, it is also sort of muddied quite a bit with my stuff. Yeah. So, I mean, what's your view on the kind of line with that? Because I've watched this a lot in myself, and I'm just curious to hear what your perspective would be around, you know, the actual event of a child next to a road.
Yeah.
Upon listening to my original answer, I realized it didn't directly answer the question, so I'm going to directly answer it here. So when it comes to protecting our children from perceived dangers, the first question is the danger real, right? In the case of where, you know, a child is next to a highway, we're next to a highway, walking next to them, the cars are going by really fast, there is a real danger, okay? Same thing if you're hiking and you're next to a cliff and there's a big fall off and you're only, 2-3 feet away from the fall off, is a real danger there. So how do we, firstly, that's a healthy fear. We shouldn't be numb to that. Like that's welcomed. This is something that is designed to keep us all safe, keep our children safe, keep ourselves safe. It's a healthy, relevant fear. Secondly, okay, what do we do in response to that fear? Okay, are we going to project the fear by with anger by saying, no, don't do that, stop it, come back here right now, come and hold my hand, and be very angry and aggressive about it? Or possibly, could we draw attention and focus and presence to a dangerous situation? And so children, I don't think, will understand what danger really means until you make a mistake and you get hurt and you fall over and start to cry, and you start to learn that, wow, I fell off this chair, I fell off this table, I better be careful next time. In situations where they're not going to get a second chance at life if they're hit by a car, then yeah, we have to say something. I don't think that's unhealthy. It's the manner in which it's said. The previous example I used, where there's a lot of anger and there's a lot of projected, don't do this, don't do that, that's kind of is like, it's projected fear, because it's like a wall that comes up. The child wants to do something, they're possibly having fun, they're having a good time, and suddenly a parent comes in and says, oh my God, don't do this, blah 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 blah. There's a big wall that comes up against their free will, their sovereignty. The way that I like to look at it is with my children is to be able to draw their attention and focus to what it is that they're doing. So if they're climbing a set of stairs and they've just learned how to walk, let's say, and they're still a little wobbly, it's hey, focus on the stairs. Don't be distracted by this noise and this noise and this noise. Focus your attention towards the activity that you're doing. In this case, climbing stairs. Or focus, if you're walking next to a highway, focus on walking. Pay attention. And notice if your child is paying attention or not paying attention. And if there is any distraction, to draw their attention back to being focused on the road. And if I'm saying, hey, let's say my child's climbing up the stairs. Hey, watch the stairs, watch the stairs, watch the stairs. Pay attention, pay attention. There's no I'm not stopping him or her in their tracks of what they're I'm not projecting an insane amount of fear into their being. I'm having them pay attention to something that is dangerous. I'm not going to explain the danger, okay, because they're not going to understand what danger means. I'm going to have them just simply be present. And I think presence is that thing that we're able to teach without a projection of a bunch of emotions. All right, back to my original answer.
It's like, yeah, until we come into the understanding of the disciplining part and the emotional weaponization of what we're projecting versus needing to guide or like really stamp down on someone's behavior is a real art. There is an art in discipline that I am not going to put my hand up and say, I know it all when it comes to discipline. I think that it's a very personal thing. But I think the direction you're going in the reflection of that is 100% like aligned to what would be awareness of like learning the art of discipline. For me, like what I might do in that situation is I'm going to rewind it back to my thinking probably around discipline, or if you like, how to encourage ourselves and others to feel for themselves, to develop an inner knowing for themselves that that's going to be dangerous for me, or this is how I need to be. I'll take it back to a moment when I was on the beach here in Kauai, and I saw two boys throwing sand at each other. One boy was throwing sand at the other boy. I assumed that they were brothers. And the mother reached out and was like, stop throwing sand, blah, blah, blah. Like, can't you, this. A lot of projected shame, a lot of projected fear. I'm going to take this away from you and blah, blah, blah. You're grounded. And a lot of projected disgust, which is a separating energy. I'm going to lock you away in the cupboard for like 10 days if you carry on this behavior. For me, how I would approach that type of scenario from a disciplining sense is I would actually take the child who the sand was being thrown at, and I would encourage him to be able to step back into his own fire, into his own anger, to say, no, stop. Why is the child not saying anything? Why is he allowing himself to be bullied? If the child was empowered in a sense that he could say from his own space comfortably, no, you were not allowed to do this you were not allowed to do this. You were not allowed to hurt me. It starts to become a very different relationship because the child is beginning to learn empowerment from this. So the mother doesn't have to be behind him every step of the way. He knows how, or she knows how, to stand up for themselves. My belief is in teaching empowerment versus the control aspect. For me, in that way, it's the question I would have more around is, it kind of takes me to the next primary emotion, which is shame. And the energy of shame is one that waters us down. It makes us feel small. It waters down the fire. And shame, at its opposite end of the spectrum, is an emotion we're able to feel when we hurt someone in its health. So in a healthy shame, in its healthy form, is when we hurt someone, we threw a rock at someone, and I feel ashamed. Why? Because I can feel your hurt. We have to be able to feel hurt, our own hurt, to feel another person's hurt. And shame is a self-governing behavior to which it's supposed to be self-governing. It's supposed to be related to how we feel if we've hurt someone else. That's a healthy way. So the question is, why did this child on the beach, why are they unable to feel the hurt of the other child anymore? When they're throwing the sand at the other child, why is that child who's throwing the sand not feeling the hurt of the other child? And the likely answer for that is that they're now numb to shame. So in between the spectrums of feeling healthy and unhealthy, if we have had too many experiences of shame, for instance, if our father or our mother has projected too much shame at us, we tend to go numb. How many of us actually listen to the words of our mothers these days, or our fathers? It's like blah, 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 blah. Especially when it comes in the form of judgment, or like what I call a shame bomb. A bomb, an emotional bomb that's just packed full of shame and disgust. How do we deal with that? Our coping mechanism has either generally been to go numb to that, or to get really angry and throw a tantrum. We generally have some type of coping mechanism or some type of inner trauma, inner conditioning around that feeling. And so I guess just, the situation that you described, how would I approach that topic, actually is a very long rewind process. And it's understanding, firstly, when I see my child, who's only 4 months old, feeling hurt, crying, something's happening, I step back and I say, not what's she doing wrong here? What am I reflecting in this part that she is acting in this way? What is it that I'm exuding here? What reflection do I have to take out of this? And it's unfortunately, or fortunately, because there is something we can do about it, is the child has to find empowerment again to be allowed to do things without intervention, without someone else, because that's really, for me, the only way that we can begin to embody accountability and responsibility. And it's not about the word responsibility, because we actually have a lot of words that we put, okay, to be a responsible parent means this, 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 and here are my rules to be a responsible parent. It's accountability, though, because we still are accountable to our children, not necessarily responsible, but accountable. And we have an accountability to our children to keep them safe. But the way that we're accountable to keep them safe, for me, comes from the child is empowered, not the child is being told, which then starts to exit ourselves out of a space of control and into a space of embodiment. What do I mean by that? Children, what I've seen of children and what I know of my own experience is just simply, we do as parents do. We feel as parents feel rather than what they say. And what they say may be this. What we do may be something entirely different. When we say to a child, okay, you guys need to go to sleep early, but dad and I are going to stay up. It places the child in a place of conflict because they want to embody what parents are doing. They love their parents so much, they just want to be their parents. Why am I not allowed to do that, mommy and daddy? Why? And it's the same question over and over again. And it's the same resistance over and over again. But what we tend to do as humans is what I found we do is we tend to put conditions around our expression of fire. What do I mean by that? When I had a lot of trapped anger, when I had a great deal of trapped anger in myself, and I had done all of this work, all this meditation, years of it, in fact, I thought I had done a lot of work. And anytime something unpleasant would happen, I would just simply go into this like Zen mode, or I'd go into meditation. I'd find some type of escape. What I would notice about myself, however, was I had 2 cats, and I created all of these conditions to which could not possibly be met. What do I mean by that? I said, cats, you're not allowed to jump onto the table. What do cats love doing? Jumping on the table. It doesn't suit Chris, though. It doesn't suit the fact that I'm also eating off the same table, and I don't want to eat your fur, and there's enough fur in my food as it is. And what I noticed would happen was that I would get so angry, rage, literally rage, that they would get up onto the table. How dare you? You should know by now. I have been teaching this to you for like 2 years. How is it that you can't possibly? And I would shame myself for this. I would shame myself. I'd be like, oh my God, I feel like such a bad person, really. Right? But I had to create the condition. Why? Because I had to release anger. I would blow up over really silly things. Right? And so I felt like I had the need to control many different elements in my life. Why? This is condition. This is what I call conditioned love. This is conditions, literally conditions. Is we create all of these conditions that our mind says, if this condition is not met, I'm allowed to be angry. And I'm allowed to have a big outburst at you, at this. And what I found through a process of doing my own inner work, and especially the emotional and feelings-based deep dive, is when I started to do the anger work, when my kitties started jumping on the table, like would jump on the table, I just didn't care. And you know what happened? They actually stopped jumping on the table. Why? Because I stopped caring. Because I removed the condition. I never found them jumping on the table again. And if they did, I didn't care. And this is the really interesting thing about the way that this universe works, the way that our reflection works, is at the moment we actually take that reflection and go, I'm going to release all this anger and I don't even care about this condition anymore. What that was really showing me as I reflect on that was, here's some work I need to do around releasing anger. And so that question about what to do is difficult to talk to that one particular scenario. It is quite a process that I feel firstly has to come from an understanding of how we are to unpack and unravel our own conditioning, how we are to unpack and unravel what emotions we have trapped in us, what drives us to feel the need that we need to control different elements of our life, rather than focusing on the situation or the circumstance by itself. I find that kind of compartmentalizes one aspect. It's like you're in a relationship with a lover or a husband, and you're only focusing on the fact that, you know, he or she cheated or something. It's like focusing on just this one compartmentalized issue, localized issue, when there is a much larger thing to unravel, which is who are we really deeper down? Who am I? That might sound like an existential question, but it's truly like, as we unravel these emotions, we begin to understand. And it's difficult to talk to. It's a sense and it's a feeling. Does that sort of address that? I'm also noting the time right now because we've not got a lot more time. But I would really love to go into the next to shame and fear and all that, but I just wonder if we just put it to questions and processing for the last bit.
Hey, Chris, can you hear me? Can
Yes.
everybody hear me? Yeah. It's 2 in the morning here and I'm very sleepy. But I just want to thank you. And yeah, my friend is sleeping next to me, so I have to be a little bit quiet. But especially the scenario you spoke about, the 2 boys, and the way you would have handled that situation really resonated. As you know, I have a son, and it's so important what you said there.
Yeah.
The way you would have handled it.
Yeah.
To give both of them the opportunity to take responsibility for their own. I can't find the word.
Behaviors. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you.
My sense of it is that when we are able to feel the hurt of other people, and which is effectively denumbing from our shame, we tend to self-govern. We actually become more accountable to our behaviors.
Absolutely. That was beautiful. Thank you, everyone. I have to leave you. But I hope I will see you next week.
Okay.
Yes?
Same time next week.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay, good night
Ciao, ciao.
and good morning.
I had like one question about you were talking about like these conditions and anger, and I was wondering if like the conditions inside the anger was somewhat related to the unhealthy aspect of anger expression. If you could like explain how the conditions work into the unhealthy aspects.
Okay. I probably jumped the gun a little bit there when I went straight to some of the behaviors. What is healthy and unhealthy for me is just about allowing the feeling to come through. That for me is the beginning of healthy. The middle of healthy is coming into our heart, becoming empathetic with the anger. So it's about embracing what's arising, but with a sense of compassion for whatever feeling is arising, either both for ourselves, for whatever hurt it is that we may feel, and for the other person who made us really angry. And generally we don't, like if you're living in a temple, like a Buddhist temple, there are probably very, very, very few reasons for a large amount of anger to come through. Generally, when anger is triggered in us is when we feel like our boundaries have been crossed, when we feel like our truth, what we want to share, what we want to embody, has just been walked on. Someone has just poo-pooed out who we are. And that makes us angry. Or someone takes food away from us and says, you're not allowed to eat anymore. Like, it's very linked to our primal nature of being allowed to express who we are, being allowed to live freely, being sovereign in our right. And so healthy is really just a feeling that we allow ourselves to feel angry. And then the second part is that we begin to behave in reaction to anger, not by an instant habitual reaction, but by a very aware, in a very aware way. In a way that we are connected to our feelings of how we are feeling and how the other person is feeling. An unhealthy would be like passive aggression, for instance. No, talk to the hand. No, I don't want to talk to you. Or sometimes sarcasm. jeering, like, oh, there, this person goes again, blah, blah, blah. Like, sometimes it might not feel so much like anger, but sarcasm and jeering can be very bullying, very passive. It's just passive aggression. Those are some of the unhealthy ones. Very, very unhealthy would be like physical abuse, would be like emotional abuse, where we are deliberately stepping on someone else's shoes. I see it a lot in today, for instance, like a lot of people are being very triggered by how the government's dealing with the coronavirus, whether the fact that it exists or not, or all these sorts of things are coming to the surface. Should we be in quarantine? Should we not? And everyone is just rah, like on the soapbox going, this is how things should be. And is that healthy or unhealthy? I think it's what's happening in a collective. At least for me, people are tapping into their anger. And I will just go a little bit more deeper. I'll explain some of my experience in like helping like us denumb from that. The first stage in it is actually just to allow us to feel it. For me and my wife, when I first met her, she would barely get angry. And I knew she had a whole bunch of trapped anger. So what I would do is I would deliberately leave dirty socks around the house. Deliberately, very aware of this. And at the end of the week, when she said nothing, I said, do you know, like, and she was picking them up, every sock, and she was putting them in the laundry. And I said, do you, like, you're aware, you know about all the socks that have been going around? And she's like, yes. I'm like, did you feel angry about that? And she said, no, like, it's okay. I just pick up your socks. I said to her, for me, that's unacceptable. Like, for me, I would really love if you could get angry with me. I welcome your anger and I welcome your wrath, because this is actually behaviorally, like, not really, it's unhealthy. I want you to be able to stand up to feeling and saying what you're actually feeling. So there's two parts to this anger, because on the one hand, some of us are willing to dish it out. On the other hand, we're not willing to receive it. We sort of have to be able to do this both ways. And as unpleasant and as we may feel about this, if I put all these conditions around it, for instance, I'm only going to be angry if it's heart-centered. I'm only going to be angry if it's empathetic. We just introduced another condition to replace all the other conditions here. To return to what I call unconditional love, love with no conditions, requires us to delete all the conditions that allow us to express what we're truly feeling. That's really this return, that's this mystical thing, unconditional love, in words, in my words. And when we can delete that condition, it's like, I might be scared to delete them. Like, I'm thinking, what if I just burst out in rage on the street if I delete all these conditions? What are people going to think of me there? Oh my goodness, what if I get really, really angry? There is this deep, so much anger and rage that just unlocks itself. I feel like I'm going to be perceived, I'm going to be a bad person. Yeah, that's a fear, but that's showing us our condition. That's showing us that we're afraid of expressing anger. And then we can work with that. We can become intimate with it. We can come to become intimate with the condition that put us into that space of trapping anger in the first place. Does that answer the question somewhat? Okay. And there's probably one more thing I want to say about, like, some people ask me, okay, why do all this work? Like, why go into emotions if all I need to do is go get a massage to release all these trapped emotions? What if I can just, like, you know, take a pill to take myself out of all these emotions, or go watch a movie and feel better about myself, or go and do whatever it is that's going to make me feel better about myself? This work is truly about addressing why we keep creating a loop for ourselves that's allowing the emotions to become trapped in the first place. No pill is taking that away from you. No massage is going to take away that loop for you. It's literally like it's installed in your body, in your system, that here is the program. This is how I'm running. This is my habits. And this is how I'm going to trap anger. We're going through a process of deleting this program to return back to the feeling. Other questions, comments?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, great. So what you're saying, and I think this is what I've understood, we create the conditions around our emotions unconsciously, and we keep like all, yeah, subconsciously we're creating these conditions so that they come up so that we can somehow address them. So they keep coming up in our life repetitively, sorry, I'm having problems speaking. Subconsciously, so we need to address them, but sometimes we're so like unaware of us like doing that, you know. Do you understand what I mean?
Yeah, I do actually. Yeah, it's like and what exists previously as conditions, like as I call them programs. I like to call them programs because they're installed in us from a child. And what happens is we have these conditions that are like, okay, when I hit the edge of a road, I'm walking through a road, it's going to trigger fear. And what happens is, or like I'll speak to a more personal example, which is like, I was traumatized but numb as a child to someone filming me naked when I was like 4 or 5, and all of the kids were laughing. And so that became a sense of really trapped emotion, trapped frustration. Why was nobody here to support me in this moment? And so I've created a condition around, let's say, my ability to be freely naked amongst other people. And what happened as, okay, I'm unable to be freely naked, I might change that in the future. I'm like, okay, I don't like this now. I'm going to change how I look at this situation. I'm going to change the conditions around it. And let's say I'm only going to allow myself to feel good while naked if I go to the gym and I change my body into an amazing sculpture that everyone is going to embrace and admire. I have not healed the wound, the trauma. I have simply changed the condition around me able to be naked. I'm able to be naked now, but the only way I'm going to be able to do that is if I continue going to the gym, I look a certain way, I've got amazing abs, and I look like this perfect specimen, blah, blah, blah. That's a transformation of a condition that I've done, but I haven't released the emotion. And like, for instance, a lot of us might have a lot of different elements. Like, let's say I notice a lot of the animal activist peoples, for instance, a lot of them, and a lot of vegans. And this isn't to shame the purpose of it or them. It's like, oh, but isn't that an amazing thing? I'm showing compassion for animals. Like, everyone should be doing this. But yet I feel so strongly about it. I almost hate, I have a hatred of people who are not vegan or animal activists. Where is this coming from? Why is this? It's as though we have taken all of these emotions that we didn't allow ourselves to feel before, which often, especially, is judgment of other people, which is a combination of shame and fear and disgust, all packed into one. And we convert that trapped emotion into a new form that says, oh, compassion. This is a good cause now. I'm allowed to be angry. I'm allowed to hate. I'm allowed to feel all these feelings because it's for a good cause. And there are so many causes that have been born out of this space. But when you look at these people and you feel them, it's difficult to engage. It may be difficult to engage with their purpose because you feel like, what's going on? What's happening here? And that's the same with climate change or any of these other so-called like the compassion movement or spiritual movement.
Hi, Chris.
Hello.
I have something I want to say.
Yeah.
First of all, it's nice to meet you.
Sure.
Heard a lot about you. Your sock story was funny, but more than that, it was very poignant and it touched an emotion inside me when you said to your woman, to your wife, your anger is welcome here. Maybe you phrased it a little different, but in that moment when you said that, there was something deep touched in me of just like, thank the Lord. To hear a man say that and embody that, it's just so needed, in our world and in the masculine. And there's just a lot of wounding there with women. And so, yeah, thank you for that.
Thank you for sharing. I agree. It's so needed. So needed. Yeah, and it's just one part of of what's needed. There's so many more things that are needed. But yeah, that's truly what the masculine has and the patriarch has done to this world. The hurt it's unleashed is to suppress the voice of women, to suppress the fieriness, to shame the fieriness, to shame that raw fire. It's raw fire of the voice of the truth of women. And because why? Because men are scared, because deep down, men are scared of their mothers. So it does take two to tango, but one has to start the initiation of bringing this back, bringing the fire back. If one doesn't start it, how are we going to do this? This takes two to tango. But it's like this karmic circle of I do this to you, you do this to me. One person has to say, I put my arms down. I give this up. This is pointless. And begin to welcome all that is unpleasant. Whether it be right, wrong, or not my perspective, doesn't matter. How do we open our hearts to receive that?
Hi, Chris. I wanted to just kind of chime in, and I think I have an answer to your question about if we have any requests of things that we might be looking for in this. And the feminine anger is it's been a big theme in my life, and I'm obviously a female, and I grew up with a lot of anger and how. And the relationship that I was taught with anger was very unhealthy. But part of that was it was a way to get power. It was a way to have power and control and to feel safe. And so sort of uncharacteristically as a female, I actually took on anger and used anger and rage to feel safe and to feel powerful for most of my young and adult life. And through my own healing process, that has really shifted. And I think anger is a great emotion for me to use an example as my own developmental relationship with anger and how it's grown and shifted and healed and is still shifting in my life today, and what my relationship is with anger now versus what it was years ago. And I'm a mom And I also work with really young children, and I'm really passionate about supporting them in their own emotional development. But kind of how we become really aware of our own, like where I'm at with my relationship with anger and where I want to get to and what my goals are, and tools on how to navigate through that relationship, through developing from the unhealthy to the healthy, and more just tools on how to do that process.
Okay. Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there, as you've sort of been doing. Yeah, I don't know if we sort of, it's a long thread, long thread. And probably what I would say to that piece now is the outcome, what I like to say is an outcome, but it's not really an outcome. It's just something we get out of this, of diving in deeply into emotions and becoming intimate with them, is what I call leading into relational artistry. And what that involves for me is the first step of that is this relationship with anger. But the second part of it is this vulnerability, the element of vulnerability. And it's vulnerability to self, and it's vulnerability to others. And we have been hurt so often, and we have learned so many unhealthy behaviors that we have developed a fear around getting truly vulnerable. We have resistance to getting really vulnerable. And it really is, especially the plight of the feminine energy, that it is difficult to put down the armor, in a way, the armor which was the coping mechanism for, this is how I'm going to feel protected in my home, which was so unsafe as a child. This is how I'm going to protect myself at school when there are so many bullies around for bullying of this and bullying of this, that I create all of these layers around myself that now I feel safe to. And to get really vulnerable is akin to walking into a battlefield with no armor on. It just kind of doesn't make sense logically. We have a lot of resistance. It's like when I did a lot more of this work, I was faced with a question of, how do I walk back into the corporate world as the Chris who's going to be feeling centric, as the Chris who's going to be heart centric, as the Chris who's not going to be empathetic, who's going to talk about his feelings, who's going to allow himself to get hurt by other people if they try and hurt them. It doesn't make sense. I was faced with a big wall. Why would I do that? Why? And this is probably where, for people who have been on like more of what I would say the hero's journey, where Joseph Campbell talks about the hero, he's on this quest to conquer whatever it is, this dragon, and then he has this giant enormous fall. It's this hero's journey which the masculine has taken a lot of, that makes the masculine more willing to give up their lives for something, to become the hero, right? It's more difficult with the feminine energy to give up that sense of protection, because it's the males who have been doing more of the hurting, who have been doing more of the attacking in a way, who have taken the first step to do the attack. And so coming to a point of resistance is, for the feminine, what I would relate more to as like the story of Inanna, the descent of Inanna. I don't know if any of you are familiar with this, but with the descent of Inanna, she and her sister, and I probably got this story maybe a bit twisted or whatever. It's the point isn't about the story in particular, but it's that she's been hard done by her sister or whatever it may be. She's hurt her sister and sent her sister to the underworld. And she's the queen of the above world. And she wants to reconcile with her other sister. To do that, she has to descend to the underworld. To descend to the underworld, there's several stages to go into the underworld. The first stage that her sister demands her do is you must give up your jewelry, you must give up your crown to reach the first layer. And she does that. And she says, yes, I will do that. I'm prepared to do that to reach reconciliation with you. And she goes into the room. And then the next stage is that the other sister, the underworld sister says, I need you for the next layer to remove all of your clothing, everything that covers your body. And you are to enter here into the next layer naked. And she's faced with a choice, like, do I do this? Resistance arises. But she chooses to say, reconciliation with my other sister is more important than how I'm feeling right now. And I choose to courageously walk through the next door. And she does that. And she walks into the room naked. In the very last stage, the sister says, I need you to remove your skin, all your skin. Everything that you have ever found valuable to you and everything that you cherish, you must remove. That's the hardest choice for her. And some would say this is like what people call the ego death or the sense of identity, letting go of the sense of identity. But she courageously chooses to do this and she walks through the next door. And her sister hangs her skin up and she's in there in spirit. And she has achieved reconciliation with her other sister. And then she's slowly making her way back up now. And she begins a path with her skin left behind. And I find this story particularly beautiful and relevant to the plight of sisterhood. Because unlike, for me, the plight of the male, which is the hero's journey, I'm the hero, I'm going to conquer and enslave and kill the dragon, kill the evil. We come to this peak and we have this big drop. And it's almost inevitable, but there wasn't as much courage that was needed, except at the beginning of the journey. It sort of just dawns on the male that we come to a place where we fall from great heights. Whereas the female must feel safe enough to go deeper and deeper and deeper, to reconnect with the depths of our shadow, what lie in the shadows about ourselves. And to do that is a shedding of a skin, which is hard. It's relaxing the resistance, overcoming the resistance with courage to take that next step. And it's a big one. It's a big one. And so, and it doesn't feel safe. This is the thing about this work is we find like, okay, I need someone who can hold a really safe space for me. Okay, I need to find someone who's really skilled, or I need to only engage with the partner who's going to make me feel safe. Doing this work, if we're to truly transform, is about walking beyond the edges of what feels safe to us. And so for me, I find that safe space, what it is a 90% safe space. It's holding a container where safety is valued, but also valued is looking beyond our edges to see what our edges are and to take the step, to be able to take that step. And it's not going to feel safe. At no point does it feel safe. And the issue I find with vulnerability and taking that next step is is we truly don't know whether the other person is going to hurt us when we step into that. But this is what I said to my wife. I said to her at the beginning of our relationship, I said, I crave for you to hurt me because I know that it's hurt that has created walls around my heart. In order for me to love you more means that I must feel my own hurt and hurt more deeply. Pain. But know that if you do hurt me, I'm now an adult and I can stand up for myself and say, you're hurting me. I feel hurt. As opposed to when I was a child where I couldn't say this. And it's this openness to feeling hurt again and pain that we sort of come back to that feeling when we had that first kiss, or when we were children and we're like so playful and gleeful. It unlocks all this. This is truly open heart and warmth and embrace. And yes, I can assure you that we will be hurt over and over again. But we have the tools to work through that. There does come a point, though, to which we have to say no. It's not to say, okay, I'm just going to let myself be hurt. There comes a point of potentially enough re-traumatization that it becomes counterproductive or counter-effective to where we're trying to heal. For instance, I might have had some people where they've been sexually abused by their fathers, and the father's on the deathbed and sort of saying, can I see you one last time? And that's a really big question. Do I try and achieve reconciliation with my father? Or is he simply going to re-traumatize me again? It depends. Has this person who you're wanting to reconcile with shown any signs thus far of wanting to attempt a deeper relationship or not wanting to hurt you again? Have the signs been there? Or have there been absolutely no signs that this person, even on their deathbed, is going to feel remorse? And so where as a a person in that situation, what do they do? And I suppose, and this woman, she did end up going to the deathbed, and the father says, can you come a lot closer because I want to touch you inappropriately again. And she was so traumatized by this moment that she had in her mind that this would be the point of reconciliation, or a point of opening, a vulnerability. So much extra work was required after that. And so there has to be, I'm saying, be open, be vulnerable, be let down the armor. But we do have to consider the other part here, which is there may be no reconciliation that's possible with this person on their deathbed.
Hey, Chris. Sorry, I'm here. Hey, sorry for jumping in late.
Mm-hmm.
I've got a question. Can I open up just around prompting anger? So as if you're trying to coax that response out. So besides planting dirty underwear around the house, how might one approach that with someone who is resistant and obviously still very closed up and adverse to opening up? And I've tried other mediums, whether that be through written form or other ways, just to enable this person to try and open up. Not that it's my role to do that, and I think we might have touched on it before, but what are some suggestions you have around, or how have you done that since? To try and prompt or to do it in a healthy way.
My sense of it is that it doesn't just happen overnight. There's an art to it. There has to be the space that's granted first. There has to be that sense of it's safe enough to do this. that is, yeah, recognition, a calling out by one partner to say, you know, you line up certain things. And like for me, it's ideally, if there was an ideal, it's done in a bit of a fun way. There can't be like, I'm just going to deliberately trigger the hell out of you just so you get angry. It's like, you know, it's kind of very antagonistic. There's a very fine line between something being antagonistic, where we're poking someone because we want something or an outcome or something to be driven, versus just simply having a person open up to their own questioning, because it is about self-dialogue in a way. It's about a question. My approach is always, here's a shared story, my personal experience, and here's a question. Whether you choose to embark on it or not, it's kind of not up to me. It is my choice as to whether to be in a relationship with you or not. But what you choose to do with my sharing of my story and how I'm encouraging you to step with me in stepping into this fire and this anger, it's an art. And whilst I did it through dropping, you know, socks around everywhere, we all have different ways. We have different relationships. The key there was, yeah, you've opened up and said, I welcome you to say something if I'm doing something that is hurting you, or that, you know, like welcoming, embracing it, because the intention is what starts it off. And for me, like in any relationship, whether it's long lost parents who you've never spoken to or lovers or whatever, the question is always, do you want a deeper relationship with me? Yes or no? If the answer's no, we know where we land. If the answer's yes, we have something to land, to work with. Okay, if it's yes, what does a deeper relationship look like? Okay, well, for me, it looks like you're calling me out when I'm hurting you. You're calling me out when I do something that annoys you, that makes you feel jealous. You're calling me out. And I value that in my relationship, because for me, that is what depth is. That's what going deeper in our relationship looks and feels like. And that starts with that. And then what happens, because both people are aligned then, hopefully, to diving in deeper relationship, that begins the art. That begins the journey. It stops being about all of the should do's and ought to's about what going deeper in a relationship looks like. It means having children. It means getting married. How much sex are we having each week? You know, blah, blah, blah. All these external trend, you know, more surface level things. Then we truly are starting to get vulnerable. We're starting to share from a deeper place. Like for me, a deeper relationship means I'm able to share about my past porn addictions or whatever might be arising for me, how much shame I have around this, that addictions, past this, and being okay with sharing it and being received for that. So many relationships, it's like, oh, this just was checklists. Oh, okay, this person is like this. I can't accept them anymore. It's the process of working deeper. Anger is you know, it's like coaxing the empowerment back out. I would encourage her to listen to these sessions. There will be 10 or whatever it will be. I don't know how many it will end up as, to help to invigorate that inner fire. But we can't, you know, we can't push anything down anyone's throat. I mean, a lot of people do. But what I feel is healthy is asking amazing questions, and questions of alignment with intention. What's your intention? What do you want to do with our relationship? Where do you want to go? Where would you like to see it? And that's some of the juicier bits. Then my sense is, after we do this literacy work, it's like this stuff should be taught at school.
If only.
This is what we should have been taught by our parents and at kindergarten, this stuff, right? So that when we come into relationships, we have all the language already to navigate it. We know what's being projected and we know what's ours. Why? So we're starting off with an ability to talk to what's coming up. Communicate. Effective communication.
Yeah, that's a big one. That powerful communication.
And then, yeah, the juicy bits after this is, once I have the literacy and I have the communication, I actually have an ability now to dive deeper into a relationship. I have an intelligence to do that. I have a capability. I have a capacity to do that. Because I have the words and I know if I'm numbing out or not. I have the ability to find resonance. And I think in next sessions, I'll start talking about resonance and healthy resonance with emotions. And if not, next week, same time, we'll be doing the same thing. It is very flowy. I just got a couple of like one word things to talk to in each of this. And I know it hasn't been as interactive, but maybe as we get on, it'll become more interactive as we start to have more languaging around this. But thank you all for coming and listening to my 2 cents on what's a passion of mine, which is emotional intimacy and relationships.